Welcome to Fielding the 68, the Field of 68's bracket show, presented by Bet Rivers. I'm Kai McKeon, and joining me today are Andy Bottoms and Lukas Harkins, two of the very best bracketologists in the entire world. We have hoops going on right now, some high drama conference tournament action. Oh, Colorado State missed the shot. Okay, great job. Good start to the show. They got a foul. Awesome. College basketball season is heating up right now, and I freaking love it. It's the best time of the year. Lukas, how you doing? How's work? How's life?
Oh, doing great. Balancing things together, We're about an hour since I got off work for the day, and now we're into bracket stuff for the rest of the night. Obviously missed watching some big results earlier today, but you follow what you can.
That's right. Andy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm watching the same game that you are, so I'm trying to if I'm looking this way during the show, It's not because I'm not paying attention. It's because I'm watching games. But
same here.
All of my step broadcast tabs are up there.
Yeah, we're just snapping our heads left and right here.
Absolutely.
We're talking.
Keep your head on a swivel this time of year. You can't.
That's right.
You can't relax.
If you don't, you're in danger of getting upset in these conference tournaments. Let's start there. I want to start off with who played themselves off the bubble the last couple of days. Who played themselves in? Lukas, I have a feeling we might be starting in the Big Ten, but you take me where you want to take me.
Yeah, playing yourselves off, I'm not sure really anyone did until today. Mm-hmm. Even teams that lost that I think will make the tournament, I'm not 100% positive they won't hear their names called. There's a wild card or two every year. So I wouldn't be super shocked if we see a team like Wisconsin still find a way in. I'm just not going to say they're at 0%. I don't think they're at a 0. Michigan's probably the team that I feel most confident is at 0 now. Lost to Rutgers is going to take them out of consideration, in my opinion. I think they're done. They're probably the first team that I think that was seriously in the bubble conversation that took itself completely out over the last couple of days.
Andy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. The Big Ten's really been the biggest result-based one so far. I do think intriguing ones, Oklahoma State. I think there's varying opinions, and I know we'll talk about them, I'm sure, as we get into last four in, first four out. I think there's some schools that thought that they played themselves in by winning over Oklahoma last night. I don't know that I would go so far as to say that, but certainly helped their case and gives them a shot at Texas later tonight. And then Mississippi State kind of avoided disaster by losing to a Castleton-less Florida. So they're at least still in the mix. They were thinking most about a 10 or 11 line. An interesting one that we may talk about is Pitt. I don't know that they played themselves out, but I would argue that for a team that was not totally safe to go and get absolutely boat raced in the ACC, it's probably not a great final impression to leave the committee with, but it is only one game. But they might be an interesting one. Again, I don't think they played themselves out, but depending upon what other results may happen around them, that could get a little bit dicey for them.
Yeah, I think we saw a lot of teams play their way still on the cut line. Oklahoma State, I think, played itself to still in consideration. New Mexico's still on the fringe after beating Wyoming. Pitt's kind of still on the edge. North Carolina's still on the edge. Arizona State's still on the edge. Rutgers is there. Mississippi State is there. And I think probably if it's talking about teams that truly played themselves into the field and feeling pretty safe, I'm starting to look at NC State. Wisconsin lost last night. Pitt got blown out today. Providence is down 5 with 39 seconds left to UConn. Michigan lost today. At a certain point, the teams that just kind of have beaten teams, NC State, and blew out Virginia Tech yesterday, I think puts them in a spot where even though they're really poor non-conference strength of schedule, I think they're the team that's played the last 2 days that I have the hardest time seeing missing right now.
A lot of intrigue. We, of course, have to cover it like that because of the national media. Who played in? Who played themselves out? As bracketologists, we'd like to keep a level head here and realize the full body of work is most important. Although I will say the committee usually kind of puts pencils down around this time. So these next couple of days, don't read into it too much, as they say, except for maybe the really, really fringe teams, which we will talk about later on in the show. Let's start off with the top of the bracket, though. Let's go 1 seeds. We're going to show a consensus version from our Fielding the 68 bracketologists popping up on the screen here. Nothing's really changed in the last several weeks, really since the top 16 reveal. Alabama, Houston, Kansas, Purdue, they are the 1 seeds right now. I'll start with Andy here. Do you think these 1 seeds are more or less locked at this point, or do you think the committee still might consider UCLA? The Jalen Clark injury certainly doesn't help their case. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, but when we talked on Monday on the show, I think there was still some debate around how many teams are really in contention, and generally we arrived at 5. So the 4 that were just on the screen plus UCLA. Felt like Texas for most of us was the number 6 overall team, and just to me there was a gap between where they sat and the others did, and so it really becomes those 5 now. The Jalen Clark injury is interesting because you're not going to have a huge sample size of games within which you can really evaluate what UCLA looks like without him. They're I think going to hold on now. It looked like based on watching the score, but I think it'll be interesting to watch how they play over the next couple of days. I don't know that it is not a absolute star of the team scenario. Like I always harken back to Kenyon Martin, which maybe is because I'm old, I don't know, but that's kind of the biggest one where it's like you knew this dude is the stud of studs on the team, and you had to know, even though you didn't have a huge sample, like this team is just not even going to be close to what they were. I don't know that we'll be able to say that very definitively about UCLA, and I think they tried to slow play it a little bit in terms of letting the news come out as you would to give yourself a chance. So I still think they're in contention if they happen to win the Pac-12, play well. Purdue goes out early. I still think those teams are close enough, but I do think the burden of proof, I guess you could say, is really on UCLA to show that they can still be really good without him.
Lukas, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think UCLA has to win the Pac-12 tournament to get a 1 line. And I think with that, they might need Purdue to lose tomorrow to Rutgers. I think they might need both of those things to happen. I think really the biggest question mark on the 1 line for me is who the committee favors in terms of Kansas versus Houston, because that'll play a big factor in locations for both those teams who really want a particular region coming in.
Let's go to bubble talk, because that's where my intrigue lies, and most likely people watching the show as well. But first, a quick message from our friends at Run Your Pool, who will be hosting the official Field of 68 bracket contest. Our esteemed colleague Rob Dowser has worked with this company before. It's why we're excited to land them as a sponsor. They have more than 50 game types for every sport you can think of: traditional bracket pool, survivor games, head-to-head, pick X games, and of course squares. The scoring is very customizable. You can tailor the bracket to your particular pool. It's very, very fun, very awesome. Here's the best part. Run Your Pool is giving away $1,500 in cash prizes for free. Just sign up at the link in the description, play.runyourpool.com/field68. That's FIELD 68. Fill out a bracket and be eligible to win. See you guys on Selection Sunday. That's Run Your Pool. All right, bubble talk. Here we go. We're going to start with Andy, and we're going to get his last 4 in on the screen and break it down for you.
So 2 of these teams are in the Mountain West. I'll kind of talk about those together, even though they're not one after the other in the order that I have them, but both have big games tonight as we talk about teams who could make themselves feel a little bit safer or potentially play their way out. I think these are a couple who fall in that category. Utah State has been one of the tougher teams for everybody to evaluate at this point. The story is well known. The resume metrics are great. Even the quality metrics average out to be in the top 40. The challenge is they have 1 quad 1 win. They somehow have 13 quad 3 wins, and they're 21-1 in quads 2 and 3 combined, and yet somehow they're 1-2 in quad 4. So therein lies the conundrum with them of you really most of their best wins, really all of their best wins have come at home, and so they're an interesting case as you look at them. Nevada to stay in the Mountain West, a little bit worse resume metrics, worse quality metrics, but 4 quad 1 wins as you look at them comparative to Utah State. Not all that dissimilar. Most of their good work has come at home as well, though they did win at New Mexico and at San Jose State, which is who they play again tonight. And if they can win there, they'll get a crack at San Diego State again. That would really be a big potential win for them as you look through that. And then you got Penn State and Rutgers, the other 2. So a Big Ten Mountain West challenge shaping up in Dayton. You got Penn State, huge game against Illinois tonight. I think if they win that, can breathe somewhat of a sigh of relief as they go through there. They've got 6 wins against the field. They, 6 or 5 quad 1 wins, 4 in quad 2. Have done a couple good things away from home, winning at Illinois and at Northwestern, and at Ohio State, who apparently is good again, maybe. I'm not sure. And then you got Rutgers, who came up with one of the bigger wins of the day so far. Got off to a really slow start against Michigan, pulled it together, and was able to come out victorious, essentially eliminate the Wolverines, as Lukas talked about earlier. For them, the question is, the resume metrics are not very good. That usually doesn't bode all that well for selection. I think the Michigan win probably puts them at 10 combined wins in quads 1 and 2, but they've looked bad since the Mawat Mag injury. Lots of questions around that, but they get a shot at Purdue tomorrow, and a chance to pick up another really big win. They beat Purdue once, winning at Purdue earlier in the season. So, wins at Purdue, at Northwestern, at Penn State. If we believe that the committee really values those high quality road wins, that bodes well for Rutgers, even though a number of other things on their team sheet may not.
And we've also heard the committee say they would consider that weird result, right, with Ohio State for Rutgers, where they made a shot, shouldn't have counted. Rutgers should have had a Q1 win on the road against Ohio State. Do you factor that much in, Andy, when you're considering this? If the committee's saying, hey, they really should have 11 Q1, Q2 wins?
I don't know. It's kind of an odd thing that came out that way. I mean, I do think you take into account the circumstances around some of these games, but, could there have been 3 other calls that were missed in that game? As somebody who watched a lot of Big Ten basketball, I can assure you that there were. So, who knows where those, who knows where those shake out. So kind of an odd factor. Even that is not really viewed as a terrible loss. It's more a factor of if you count it as a win as opposed to, taking it away as a loss.
Extra puzzly, it seems, this year, the bubble here. Let's get Lukas's last 4 teams in the field up on the screen. Give you a chance to run through them as well.
Yeah, actually quite a few differences here from Andy in terms of which ones are in my last 4 in. So Pitt's my 4th to last team in. I will note that these were submitted this morning. So prior to Pitt getting destroyed by Duke, and I could easily see them falling out of the field as a result of that for me. And as a result, maybe a team that could jump into there is Rutgers, who we'll talk about in my first 4 out next. Those 2 teams having opposite results today could change some things there. Mississippi State picked up a win earlier today to stay on my right side of the cut line. Nevada, I think, is probably in better shape for selection than they are necessarily for seeding. Their resume metrics are okay, whereas their quality metrics are pretty far below. I think a win over San Jose State tonight puts them into an okay spot, especially with so many bubble teams that have struggled down the stretch of these last couple of days. And then I moved Oklahoma State in after their win over Oklahoma last night. They're going to need to beat Texas, I think, tonight to keep that spot, especially if a bid stealer arrives to shrink the at-large field. I think they're definitely going to need to beat Texas. I don't think 18-15, which would be the record, would get in.
Yeah.
I think they would have to beat Texas in that game to stay in that spot. But for now, as a snapshot of where things currently stand, I have them just ahead of the teams in my first 4 out.
All right, let's flash up the consensus last 4 in from fielding the 68. Penn State, Nevada, Utah State, Oklahoma State. So familiar teams. We just went through all 4 of these. Let's shift now to the first 4 out, get some differences, get some reasoning behind each. Lukas, we will start with you this time, a little snake order. What do we got first 4 out?
So my first 4 out, I've gone with Arizona State, followed by Rutgers, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. Again, I'll reiterate that this took place before today's results, so Rutgers would probably move into my field right now. Arizona State is relatively close. They've got a big couple games coming up. They get USC tonight. That would put them probably into the right side of the cut line as well, depending on how other teams perform. Obviously, we've seen the Pitt disaster today, and on top of Providence losing to UConn, there are some teams that can juggle from this morning already into the rest of the day. North Carolina has another opportunity. They get Virginia. We'll see what goes from there. As far as Wisconsin, they're sitting in limbo. They lost to Ohio State last night. They have horrible metrics. I mean, they're sub 80 in the net now. I will say that if there's going to be a surprise team, they're one of the teams that I look at to be a potential surprise on Sunday. They still have 6 quad 1 wins. They have 11 wins against the upper 2 quadrants. I think they're a team that could potentially get that type of boost. I would say the same potentially about New Mexico, who has 2 tremendous road wins to their resume. Those 2 teams, I think, are ones that every bracketologist will have out on Selection Sunday, and rightfully so. But are teams that could be in line to be that surprise if the committee leans in a certain direction.
Let me ask you a question real quick. We know Rutgers had a really high net last year, but a lot of Q1 wins. Compare and contrast Wisconsin this year with Rutgers last year for me. I'm putting you on the spot a bit, but what's the difference between those two teams?
Yeah, well, for one, I think that the resume metrics are already different in that regard. I think Wisconsin's fallen sub 50 there, which you could say that they're very similar for a long time. They're not quite in that regard right now. I mean, quality metrics. Wisconsin's fallen below 80 in a lot of spots. Rutgers had a quality rating average in the upper 60s last year. Wisconsin's trending down in that regard. Also, Rutgers just had way better top tier wins last year. They were 5-5 in Quad 1A. Wisconsin's 2-6 this year. I think if you really want to pinpoint elite wins, Rutgers had them. Wisconsin doesn't.
Gotcha. All right, let's shift over to Andy's first four out. Break it on down. What do we got here?
Yeah, a lot more similarities here. Oklahoma State, I had them. I kind of wrestled with whether or not to have them in the field after they won last night. I kept coming back to their 4-11 against the field. Now that doesn't count their wins over Texas Tech and the 3 wins over Oklahoma, who are obviously not in the field, but just felt hard to totally justify having them jump into the field. I had them out going into last night. I just kind of kept them there with the thought that we'll see what happens today and figure out where to go from there. So they're right there. Wisconsin, that Lukas hit on well, and I think they're a team, like he said, I could see them getting in because there are a handful of top end wins there, but it just feels like you're going against a lot of trends and certainly against the eye test to whatever extent that's used. It doesn't reflect favorably on them. Arizona State's definitely an interesting one. They get a chance to face USC tonight. They win that, they likely play Arizona. I think they have a couple good chances. Now they had a couple good chances last weekend as they visited the LA schools and came up empty, and even played a closer than you'd like to see game against Oregon State last night. But they're right there in the mix. That road win at Arizona is pretty huge, but only 2 wins against the field at this point, so that doesn't really help them. And then Carolina, as we said, right there trying to figure out if I don't think one more win over Virginia is enough to get them in. I think they need to probably make it to the finals to really make their case a bit more compelling, although they did improve their metrics quite a bit by winning by as much as they did yesterday.
Yeah, we're officially at that point in the year where if you don't win your auto bid, you're guaranteed to lose another game, which is just the nature of it. So no matter what a win you get today, if you lose tomorrow, it could overshadow that. I mean, it's so easy to bounce up and bounce back down in a hurry.
Do you guys buy the narrative of, hey, it's Carolina, they're going to put them in the tournament if they're anywhere close? Are you buying that from like a NCAA wants them in the field perspective? They are humans after all.
I'll buy that as long as North Carolina does something else.
Okay. So when
I don't think they're there yet. And the thing about Virginia is, let's say they beat Virginia today. What are the odds? It's a neutral site game. So Virginia, presumably the net would have Virginia favored to win that game. North Carolina wins that game, and now it loses its home quad 1 win over Virginia because Virginia falls out of the top 30. They're 30th right now. I don't know. Not to say that quadrants are the be all end all, but North Carolina could beat Virginia and still end the day with 1 quad 1 win. Yeah.
Andy, you said they probably wouldn't be in if they beat Virginia. So you're kind of poo-pooing the narrative, I suppose.
Yeah. I could see it certainly. And conspiracy theorists would certainly have a field day with that one. And, I think the challenge is they just haven't. We can look at that team as we have all year long from a non-bracketology perspective and say they should be so much better than what they are based on what they showed last year. But the reality is they just haven't been. Doesn't mean they can't be. It doesn't mean they won't play well in this tournament. They certainly played well yesterday. But if you look at on-court results, they've got a win over NC State and a win over Virginia, and that's all they have against teams that are in the field right now. And I just find that a little bit hard to believe. And I don't think as Virginia's play has gone down the stretch, it's still a meaningful win, don't get me wrong, but I don't think beating them means what it probably did earlier in the season. Even the first time they beat them, I think Virginia was looked at in a little bit different light, even though they were kind of trending in the direction they're going in now. So I just find it a little bit hard to believe that would be enough. Now, maybe getting to the final and losing might be getting them close enough where you could entertain some of those thoughts of, well, maybe we'll squint hard enough. I can see that this is the same team and all that stuff, but you'd like to think the committee wouldn't do that, but you never know.
Even with the narrative, I think they need a lot of work to do.
I like Riley chiming in on the chat. Charleston, they have a win over Charleston, and they're in the field. bracketologists.
I didn't say it.
Let's throw up the consensus field of 68. First four out for the folks at home here. Rutgers, Arizona State, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. Seems to be a pretty nice consensus there.
We should again note this consensus was before Rutgers playing Michigan today.
Right. So would you have Rutgers over Oklahoma State, Lukas, right now in yours, just based on that win currently before Oklahoma State plays Texas?
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
The answer to that question I don't think matters, because if we lose to Texas, yes, Rutgers will be over. If they beat Texas, no.
Okay.
So I don't think the answer to that necessarily matters, because Rutgers has had the game today and Oklahoma State hasn't. We know that Oklahoma State is going to play that game tonight, and that solves a lot of issues there.
Gotcha. All right, before we get into some team hitters, a quick message from Vaulted. You guys ever get tired of trying to prove that you won an argument, that your takes weren't hot, that they were actually right? Well, I got an answer to your problems. Vaulted is a new sports prediction app that turns your opinions into facts. You can store all of your predictions, all of your hot takes in your own vault now and forever. Challenge your friends, keep track of the results, prove that you are, in fact, the smartest. Vaulted will also be releasing more than 50 pools in the next 3 months. So download the app at the link below. Sign up for your 3-month free trial and store your predictions now. That's VLTED, pronounced Vaulted. Check them out. Interesting new little app there on the store. See what they got to offer. All right, back to the show here. Team hitters. Oklahoma State is interesting to me, and we talked about it a little bit. But if they do lose to Texas, they have 3 wins over 500, and I think that's why people are kind of saying they're not quite in the field yet. But you've seen a lot of folks on Twitter saying no, they did definitely play themselves in after the Oklahoma win. What's the precedence?
Their is definitely on the bubble. There just isn't.
Yeah. What's the precedence for teams making it so close to 500? I suppose.
Pretty much anytime you're at 3, if you're at 3 over, you're in danger. I think 4 puts you in a relatively decent spot, which is why I talk about if they win against Texas tonight, the worst they can do is 4 games over. And not only that, they also had a win over Texas, which would be extremely meaningful. I think the teams that are 3 over, I have real trouble with seeing getting in the field, and historical precedent backs that up. I don't have the numbers directly in front of me.
I think Michigan last year was one of the first ones in a long time to make it at 3 over. So
I think
it's a recent example, but
but I think there was one in 2000 that was 3 over, and then 1 last year, and that's it.
Yeah.
Wow, all the way back 2000 was the.
I think that's right.
Holy cow! Okay, so it is a bit unprecedented. We'll say. I mean, there's precedents, but it's not commonplace. Let's shift up back to the top real quick. Gonzaga obviously scored an enormous win over St. Mary's, a team that people have kind of sort of forgotten about, it feels like. Can they get to a 2 seed is my opening question. If so, who falls off? Is it Baylor? Is it Arizona? We know Baylor just lost to Iowa State. Arizona's been a bit wishy-washy down the stretch. I'll go to Andy first, then Lukas. Andy.
Yeah, I think they can. I think they would probably already be there if you take away, and obviously you can't do this, but if you took away either the Loyola Marymount loss or even that loss at St. Mary's in a game that it really felt like they were going to win. Mm-hmm. But even so, I think they certainly could be there. They've got 6 quad 1 wins. They do have the 1 quad 3 loss, but have certainly played well down the stretch. The offensive numbers speak for themselves, and all but one of their losses came in quad 1A. I think that as you look for teams to potentially fall off, I think it'll be interesting to evaluate Baylor. That becomes their, I think, 10th loss today. Just Iowa State has their number, I guess, but they've lost there. Arizona maybe I think is another possibility, depending upon what they do in the Pac-12 tournament. If they've already got a bunch of weird losses, a bunch of really high end wins. Their profile has pieces that don't really seem to go very well with one another. So I think either of those teams could potentially fall off. You've also got Marquette, though. Avoided. They're still in that mix, I think, as well. Certainly didn't play well today, but found a way to win. If they somehow can, they won the Big East, they can, back that up with a Big East tournament title. I think they would be and should be in that conversation as well. As you think about that. So I think Gonzaga is firmly in the mix at this point, and the Baylor loss today results. The one result that would have impacted them today certainly helped.
Yeah. Lukas?
I was extremely close to putting Gonzaga on my 2 line this morning. Over either Baylor or Arizona. I think that's very close. I still think it's close between Baylor and Gonzaga. I would probably still lean with Baylor at this point. The difference I think that we'll see though in between today and tomorrow is with regards to Baylor's losses to Iowa State. Arizona gets Stanford tonight. That's the kind of loss that I think would be unexpected, but is the type of loss that I think could propel. First of all, it's the type of loss that Arizona has taken this season. They've already lost like at Utah this year. They lost at Stanford. Like it's not out of the realm of possibility for them to lose to Stanford again. And if they do so, I'd probably lean in favor of Gonzaga at that point. But they're definitely firmly in the mix. I think they're a step ahead of Marquette for that 2 seed if in terms of 3 seeds competing to move up a line. But I think they're definitely firmly in the mix at this point. But also, I'm not sure they really want to be either. UCLA is going to go west of the 2 seeds. So
true. Yeah. Gonzaga would not be in the West, I suppose, if they were on the 2 line. Yeah. We kind of talked about the weird Michigan, Wisconsin, Rutgers, Penn State, Big Ten mess. It's looking a little bit clearer at this point. Obviously, still stuff to play out. Penn State, how do you feel about them, Andy? Like overall, in terms of, we'll use the word safe, but
yeah, I definitely would not say they're safe. I mean, losing to Illinois would not be a bad loss per se, but I'm not sure they're in a position to really take another one, dependent upon what an Oklahoma State would do or the Mountain West teams do. So yeah, I would not.
USA team.
Yeah, I would not categorize them as safe at this point. I think winning over Illinois wouldn't make them lock either, but it certainly would give them a little bit of breathing room that they don't really have today.
Yeah, I didn't mention Penn State in my last 4 in because they're my 5th to last team in. They're right there.
Okay. Yeah, so you got them above that 4-team cut line, a little bit safer.
Probably even safer than they were at that time because Pittsburgh was my 4th to last and they got destroyed. So
right. Yeah, and people are worried in the chat about Pitt now.
I'm terrified for Pitt.
The loss was Duke, who, it's a Q1 loss, but still didn't look good. Gosh, it seems, I understand the nature behind it, but you see Pitt and Clemson, if both of them were to miss the field, for instance, going 15-5 in the ACC, I remember Washington won the Pac-12 regular season one year and missed the tournament. That would be kind of shades of that happening if that ended up coming to fruition. But yeah, I have a hard time seeing Pitt missing the field entirely, but they are slipping down quite a bit. Let's talk West Virginia, who just gave KU a game.
Yep.
And they do have a better resume than Oklahoma State, but it's not super different from Oklahoma State. Would you say, Lukas? Do you think they're safely in the field, and how high do you think they can be seeded now? I think they're a 9 seed in the latest fieldings, the 68 bracket.
Yeah, I was a little bit higher on them earlier. I had them as a 9 seed a couple weeks ago or a week and a half ago or so, and I haven't moved them as everyone else has moved them up. I think they're still in that 9 seed area for me. I think their resume is actually in some ways similar, but also is just better across the board than Oklahoma State's. Oklahoma State's 10-13 against the upper 2 quadrants. West Virginia is 12-13. That's 2 extra wins. Oklahoma State has a quad 3 loss. West Virginia doesn't. I think that metrics wise, West Virginia is 19th in the net. Oklahoma State 41st, 30th in resume metrics versus 45, 16 in quality metrics versus 36. It's just better across the board in a lot of ways. They're both 1-10 in quad 1A, but I think overall West Virginia's put itself in a much better spot. I think they're probably going to be in that. I think still a 9 seed range, even with a loss. I think they're the type of resume that's typically gotten, I wouldn't necessarily say rewarded, but in a way rewarded in that 7 to 10 seed range, despite having a high quantity of losses. When all of their losses are against good teams for the most part, 12 of their 13 are in quad 1, 10 of their 13 are in quad 1A. I think that's a team that gets the benefit of strength of schedule and gets it into an 8-9 game.
Yeah, what's West Virginia Q1A right now? 1-10, something like that.
10.
Yeah, well, probably 1-11 now that they lost.
Oh yes, 1-11, I would guess. I don't remember if I updated it before or after or not. I don't remember.
Yeah, well, I mean, and depending on how other teams play, somebody might move just one way or another on the line.
True.
But yeah, they're but they have hardly lost outside of that. So yeah, I would tend to agree with Lukas. Their metrics are way better. They were 16th across the board in the quality metrics coming into today. So pretty. They're 20 spots above
The very rare 16, 16, 16 across all three quality metrics.
Hey, Brady in the chat, talk about my Friars. Just got here. Why not? Providence. They just lost to UConn. Andy, still safe, still in for you right now? 10, 11, where you got them?
Yeah, I had them coming into today, I believe on the 10 line, but maybe as my I think
they were my top 11 today.
I think I had my next to last 10. They were next to Pitt. So Pitt's loss didn't I guess helps them a little bit. Obviously today's loss is not bad by any stretch, losing to UConn. They've still got the 4 quad 1 wins, non-conference strength of schedule, not very good. I think they'll be okay. But I do think they could find themselves in Dayton depending upon what other teams around them do. Really, did win at Seton Hall, won at Villanova, at Butler, but their 3 marquee wins all came at home.
I appreciate you saying they won at Butler as a big deal.
Well, I mean, it's technically, at least as of, I don't know, is that still at Butler? Is that still a quad 2 win at this point after yesterday?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Utah State, we talked about a little bit in the bubble section. That's the weirdest team to me, besides my Tigers, who we're going to talk about in a bit. Their metrics are insane. They have no Q1 wins, or they have one maybe now.
Yeah, one.
Yep. Sort them out for me, Lukas, real quick. If you were to give a 50-50 coin flip, would you be on the side of they're in or they're out? Give me a percentage chance of them making the field.
Quite frankly, I've been in for a bit, and I still think they're in. I actually moved them up to the 10 seed line. I think, generally speaking, I think we get a little bit too caught up in the quantity of quad 1 wins. Like, really, is the difference between 1 quad 1 win and 2 quad 1 wins really that much bigger than the difference between 5 and 6? Like, they're 1-4 in those games. Like, there's teams that are 2-8 that we're discussing that are just like
the old age-old question.
Like, it's not like Utah State's, especially this year. And I've talked about this a few times with regards to quad 3 and quad 4 games. I mean, Houston has a quad 3 loss. Gonzaga has a quad 3 loss. UConn has a quad 3 loss. St. Mary's has 2 of them. Texas A&M has 2 quad 4 losses. So does Utah State. Like, I think we underestimate how difficult those games can be. Like, I think we've seen the best teams in the country prove that this year. The bottom of the barrel isn't exactly that bottom. I think it's easy to lose those types of games. And I think the fact that Utah State is 22-5 against the upper 2 quadrants, the upper 3 quadrants, I think is impressive. Their numbers are unprecedented to miss the field. If they do, and I think if they beat New Mexico in a close game tonight, that could be another quad 1 win. Like, I think that they're going to have games that are close. Like, New Mexico's 50th in the net. They win that. That's a fringe quad 1 win. They already beat Nevada at home, who's 36. That's 6 spots away from being quad 1. I think we're splitting hairs a little bit in terms of the quadrants. And obviously they have a win over San Francisco that was neutral site that is played in San Francisco, which that affects them. They've been really good on the road this year, and that one doesn't even count. I think Utah State's probably in the field, and I think with a win tonight, they're over 80% for me.
And as Cole points out in the chat here,
they're pretty 50-50, to be clear.
Okay. As Cole points out in the chat here, the net, not the end-all be-all, especially for selection, but if they're on the top 25 of the net, it would be a pretty bad look to miss the tournament.
Yeah, I think I said that earlier in the week. I don't know whether that's just me thinking that matters and it really doesn't matter.
But shouldn't it?
I do think in a way, like, not taking them is, to a certain extent, crapping on the tool that you're using to at least group teams and group wins and whatever. So I do think there's an element of that. I probably buy into that element a little bit more than the whole, like, they want to find a way to get North Carolina in the field thing of, like, there's probably a point where you're in the low 30s. You could maybe make an argument, but I mean, I think they dropped from 21 to 22 from last night to today. But I mean, it's not a great endorsement of your ranking tool that you've used to leave them out. But doesn't mean that they won't. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't. But I think it matters. That might be dumb.
I don't think it's likely, but I think there's a reasonable possibility if the committee decides to favor high quality wins over everything else this year, that a team like Utah State misses the field and a team like Wisconsin makes it. And if that's the case, the committee would be taking a team that is a quad 1 win at home they would be taking a team that's a quad 3 win at home over a team that's a quad 1 win at home. And I think that would be a major slap in the face to their own metric, which I just don't think is likely to happen.
It's an interesting way to put it. We're going to my favorite team because I'm a Mizzou Tiger alum and I want to talk Mizzou Tigers. And there's a lot of intrigue around Mizzou because they have a really, really good combined resume metric, an average resume metric, but they have a really bad predictive metrics. One of the worst, maybe the worst right now in the field for at-larges. Andy, sort my Tigers out. I think most have them on the 8 line, fielding the 68, switching to a 7 recently. Where do you think they end up? How do you even begin to look at Mizzou?
They're a difficult one to get a read on for exactly the reason that you said. I mean, there's a 30, like the gap between their average quality metrics and their average resume metrics is 37. So, and this is one of those where it's often been said, I think it was, I believe it was Lukas who did a really good job writing this up a year or two ago about the importance of the resume metrics the resume metrics for selection and the quality metrics for seeding. Now, when those two things tell vastly different stories, I do think it becomes a little bit intriguing to try to figure out, where they may end up. And today we have them as a 7. I had them as my last 7 really for the last couple of days, because to me, that's where things get a little bit cloudy in terms of who's there. You've got them, Iowa, Illinois, Maryland in that mix, Florida Atlantic, Arkansas, teams that you can really have one thing or another that you can really poke holes in with them. I think what they have going for them is they don't have any losses outside of quad 1, which is somewhat important. They're 9-8 in the top 2 quadrants. That win at Tennessee obviously looms large. Beating Illinois on a neutral floor is important. And again, not having a quote unquote bad loss as you look at it that way. So I think they probably in that 7-8 range to maybe split the difference between what the metrics say they are feels about right. But again, if you go back to some of the, what Lukas was talking about before, you really want to go value quality wins. They have some of those that you could do that, and they haven't taken bad losses. And it a little bit speaks to how much validity or how much stock this iteration of the committee puts into the metrics and how important those are, because their quality metrics are 64, 57, 57. So it's not like there's an outlier that's pushing them wherever. They're all kind of in the same range that says you wouldn't really be a team that would make the field. So they're definitely one of the ones that I think would be easy to misseed as we start thinking about where we'll have them and where the committee might have them. I think there's an interesting range of potential outcomes there, depending upon which of the aspects of their team sheet are valued the most.
And quite frankly, there's really no true resume comparison in the net era since 2019. Pretty much every team with a gap as big as Missouri currently has, like in similar rankings in that the 30 to 20 to 50 to 60 range, that kind of gap, almost all of those teams have a lot of quad 2 or quad 3 losses, which Missouri doesn't. I think that makes it really interesting. I think they're a team that could up anywhere between a 6 and a 9 and 6 and a 10 even, and I wouldn't be surprised.
As a Mizzou fan, give me a 7 or a 10, please. I'd like to avoid the 1 seeds if at all possible.
In that case, I'd be rooting against Florida Atlantic.
Yes, we will talk about them in a sec here. Question from Jacob in the chat. Does the higher seed pick their location? Do teams pick their location? I'm pretty sure it's based on geography, but I guess a team can request to not play in a certain region, Andy? They really don't want to?
Only the top overall seed.
Seed. Okay.
Gets that choice. And that's really which regional they want to go into. I think most of the time the sub-regional is pretty easy. You're just looking at it based on that. But it doesn't, and then the geography is used, but you're also using it in tandem with the other bracketing rules. So it's not always an absolute in terms of where somebody can be.
I wonder why a team would ever choose not to be in the region that they're kind of located in, top seed overall. Not sure if there's been a history of like.
I feel like we made the argument about this a year or two ago for a team moving out of its main. I don't remember why.
Or there were a couple that were somewhat equidistant where you might have a preference of one or the other. I think that's really probably where it comes into play a little bit more than because most of the time it's going to be a pretty clear cut. Why would you not want to do whatever? You're also the top seed, so why would you?
Like for instance, Kansas this year, if they were like between like a Louisville and a New York or something, I mean, a Nevada, a Las Vegas, and a New York, you might choose Las Vegas because there's just less teams going out west.
Right.
But
fair points, fellas. Okay, let's talk FAU real quick because by my quick calculations, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's really the main bid stealer left in conference world is Conference USA. Because we assume
DePaul is so mad at you.
DePaul is coming there in terms of mid-major conferences, I suppose. I mean, FAU is in. We all agree. Hopefully, at large, they're safe. So if they lose CUSA, there's a bid stealer, and that's bad news bears for the bubble teams we talked about. Yep. I guess. Let's talk FAU. How about that? FAU, Lukas, ceiling for them. How far do they fall if they don't win the CUSA conference tournament?
I think if they don't win, they're pretty much stuck in an 8-9. I don't really
not below. So okay,
yeah, I don't think I see them fall down to a 10. I don't think so. Their numbers are just too good. I think people underrate who they would lose to in the CUSA. Like if it's North Texas or UAB, it's just not nearly as bad a loss as you'd expect. I mean, North Texas at a neutral site is a quad 1 game. North Texas is 42nd in the net. I don't think I would be that concerned about dropping below that. They're still 2-1 in quad 1 right now. They're 5-3 against the upper 2 quadrants. No bad losses. I would take that in an 8-9 game over those teams that are currently on the bubble in the 10-11 area. With a win, I think they're probably a 7 if they win the CUSA. Wouldn't be that shocked if they went up to a 6 like that Buffalo team a few years ago. Mm-hmm. But I think I'd feel pretty okay with them being a 7 seed, kind of like that Wofford team a few years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Both very underseeded from an analytics standpoint. Andy, would you agree? 7 to 9, kind of the range?
That feels right. I have them as a top 8 today.
They're my last 7.
I think if you looked at it and if they lose in the quarterfinals, maybe I don't think they would drop that much further. But I think you could make the argument that if they lose to UAB or North Texas in the final, particularly North Texas, given where the tournament's played and things like that. I mean, I struggle a little bit to really drop them much at all in that case, and I do think they could work their way up to the 7 line just because I think there's some openings there dependent upon today the 7s are generally like Duke, Northwestern, Michigan State. Any of those goes,
all those teams are going to lose.
Go out early.
Probably.
Duke's look good so far in the ACC. Maybe they're the one that feels a little bit safer than the others. But Northwestern, Michigan State haven't even played yet, so they play the first game tomorrow.
Right.
I think Northwestern could have a really difficult time with whoever wins that Penn State Illinois game. So they lose, there opens up that spot. But yeah, I think in that 7 to 9 range, I'd be hard pressed to push them down to a 10. I just don't know what they could do to fall that far.
They have to get blown out, which they haven't done.
So. I think they would need to get blown out and almost like an injury would need to happen. You know what I mean? As we start talking about that, I just don't know. Yeah, I think that it would take something very much out of character for what they've done over the rest of the season for them to drop that far.
Go watch the Owls if you haven't watched the Owls. They're fun to watch. They're going to be a dangerous team. Fellas, I think that's it. I think that's all we got today. But folks, appreciate you guys joining us. We have a show tomorrow. Correct me if I'm wrong. Field 68 is back. Back tomorrow.
We have a brand new host tomorrow.
Brand new host, fresh new host. So stay tuned for that one. We'll get you even more updated. Is it Lukas? Is Lukas the host tomorrow? Yeah. We'll have Lukas, Brad, Wachtel, and Rocco Miller on tomorrow. All fantastic bracketologists.
Say goodbye to Andy. This is Andy's last episode of the year.
Andy, we appreciate, and mine as well, I think. Yes, and in fact, I know. Andy and Kai, say goodbye to you guys. Reminder, as always, check out the Field of 68 Twitter handle after the show for the consensus bracket up to date from the fellas here, the elite bracketologists. See where your team is at right now. See the first 4 in, last 4 out. Reverse that, last 4 in, first 4 out. And we'll see you tomorrow on Friday. Enjoy the games.